なんで俺の邪魔してんの？お前俺と同じなんだろ。
僕は人の命を救った時だけ自分が人間だと実感できるんだ。
俺が悪役で。
When does a person become irredeemable? Should we be judged by our best actions or our worst? When do we decide that someone is past the point of redemption? Inuyashiki is a Japanese manga series written and illustrated by Hiroya Uko, which was later adapted into an anime and live-action film. It centers around two characters, Ichihiro Inuyashiki and Hiro Shishigami, whose lives took a drastic turn after a mysterious extraterrestrial event transformed both of them into powerful weaponized cyborgs. Despite their similar transformation, they respond to their newfound abilities in drastically different ways. Inuyashiki, a kind elderly man, uses his powers to help people and save lives, while Hiro, a troubled teenager, uses his abilities to enact violence and death. The series explores themes of morality, human connections, and finding a place in an inevitable world. It's a gripping and thought-provoking series, blending sci-fi elements with deep character-driven story that made it one of my favorites. Before his transformation, Hiro was already somewhat emotionally detached, but after gaining immense powers, his detachments intensified into sociopathy. He begins using these powers to kill strangers without remorse, targeting random families in their homes. As he continued committing these murders, he eventually attracted the attention of the police and media. Despite being haunted, he used his powers to evade capture, killing law enforcement officers and anyone who tried to stop him. His attacks escalated over time, leading to a large-scale assault on Tokyo, where he caused numerous deaths. Even as Hiro continued his path of destruction, there were glimpses of more conflicted side to his character. What Hiro lacked was not a conscious, but the ability to channel his emotions in a healthy way. Hiro's descent into violence was not the product of a wicked heart, but of a desperate, damaged one. His transformation into a monster was a process, a response to years of emotional neglect, dysfunctional home life, and extraordinary powers that amplified his pain and gave him a way to act on his darkest impulses. If his circumstances had been different, if he had the support and guidance he needed, it's possible that his story could have taken a much different path. More often than not, you will find that when you trace the life of a serial killer, at some point in their youth, they experience some sort of trauma, neglect, or abuse, whether it's emotional or physical, that significantly hampered their development and caused them to form some sort of a personality disorder. Hero's journey reminds us that monstrosity is often a reflection of the world's failure to understand and care for those who are suffering. So let us look at the people who helped shape this monster. At the heart of Hero's character is a deep emotional wound caused by abandonment. His father, the first significant figure in his life, left him and his mother without any support, both emotionally and financially. Hero's emotional trauma may have been lessened if his father had simply left them entirely, leaving without a trace, rather than staying close and living a happy, comfortable life with a new family. Seeing his father build a new prosperous life while abandoning him and his mother likely deepens Hero's sense of betrayal and fueled the resentment he harbored. This situation was even more painful because it forced Hiro to confront the fact that his father chose to move on, not just from his mother, but from him as well, choosing another family over them. Had his father left them without a trace, Hiro might have been able to craft his own narrative to cope with the loss. Instead, Hiro was forced to witness this dark reality. His father was still nearby, but now living a life of comfort, security, and happiness, the things that Hiro and his mother had been denied. This would have made the abandonment feel more than just a loss, but like a conscious rejection of him. It wasn't just that his father was gone, it was that he seemed to be thriving without them, leading a better life that Hiro and his mother had been excluded from, leading Hiro to internalize sense of being unwanted, unloved, and abandoned. The absence of a father figure or any strong adult support left Hiro without guidance during his formative years. As a teen, Hiro was likely struggling to understand his place in the world, wrestling with repressed feelings of pain, anger, and feelings of worthlessness. His emotional detachment can be seen as a defense mechanism, a way to cope with the abandonment he experienced. When Hiro gains his incredible powers, his actions become a reflection of his inner turmoil that has been festering for years. His newfound abilities grant him godlike control over life and death, and he uses them to assert dominance of a world he feels had discarded him. Hiro's violence is in part a way to reclaim power in a life where he felt powerless. The ability to kill without consequence became a tool for Hiro to express his anger and frustration, especially toward those who seem to have stable, happy lives that he has been denied. His seemingly random murders of families living in beautiful homes may symbolize his deep-seated envy and hatred toward those who have the stability and love that he never had. These families represent his father's new family. Even the neighborhoods and homes he chooses resemble his father's new home. This internal conflict is exacerbated by Hiro's newfound powers. With the ability to kill anyone at will, Hiro could easily murder his father and exact his revenge. But this would mean giving up entirely on the possibility of an emotional resolution. In many ways, Hiro's power grants him the physical means to act on his hate, but it also makes his emotional needs much clearer. Killing his father wouldn't satisfy the part of him that still seeks his father's love and recognition. Thus, Hiro is paralyzed, unable to go through with the act or confront the reality of his emotions. He doesn't want to kill his father, but he wants to repair what was broken. Hiro's love for his mother is one of the real emotional connections he has in his life, and it's in this bond that shows he is not entirely devoid of empathy or emotion. He loves her and cares for her, but his relationship with her was far from fulfilling, largely because she was a weak and vulnerable person. From a young age, Hiro was thrust into the role of an emotional caretaker for his mother after his father abandoned them, leaving him to shoulder responsibility that no child should have to bear. This dynamic contributed to his sense of emotional isolation that plagued Hiro's childhood. His mother's weakness meant she was unable to be a pillar of strength he needed growing up, especially as he struggled with his pain of his father's abandonment. Hiro felt like he had to protect her and hide his own pain. Her fragility reinforced his sense of powerlessness before he gained his powers, leaving him to grapple with his emotions alone. Even when he gained his extraordinary abilities and healed her illness, the underlying imbalance in their relationship remained. She was someone he cared for deeply, but she was also someone who couldn't fulfill his need for emotional support or guide him as he struggled with his dark impulses. This dynamic shaped Hiro's behavior and emotional development. Without a strong parental figure to lean on, he grew up feeling isolated and responsible, bottling up all his pain and anger, rather than risking the fragile bond he had with his mother. In many ways, he became the caretaker, shielding her from the weight of his internal struggles, and as a result, denying himself the guidance and comfort he needed during his difficult times. This lack of reliable emotional anchor contributed to the deep sense of isolation and frustration that ultimately fueled his actions after gaining his powers. Children of absent parents end up raising themselves to some extent. They learn not to talk about the difficult or painful things or feelings present in the home for the fear of hurting the other parent or stressing them out even more. Ando was Hiro's childhood friend, and they shared a close bond long before Hiro's transformation. They spent much of their time together, bonding over their shared interests in manga and video games. They were typical teenagers, enjoying their shared passions and escaping into fictional worlds together. A contrast to the isolation and emotional burdens Hiro felt at home. Ando's presence gave Hiro a semblance of stability. Their friendship was marked by a mutual sense of comfort. However, Ando's gentle and somewhat timid nature made him less equipped to handle the emotional needs that Hiro hides beneath the surface, even after his transformation. Though they were close friends, their relationship lacked the emotional depth that would allow Hiro to confide his deepest fears and pain. Ando remained a companion and a friend who understood Hiro's surface interests, but he couldn't reach the core of Hiro's emotional turmoil, which would later become evident as Hiro's life took a dark turn. Ando was deeply disturbed by Hiro's turn to violence and didn't know how to handle it, leading him to distance himself from Hiro at a time where Hiro may have needed him the most. Ando was horrified and afraid, understandably so. Hiro's descent into killing was a moral line that Ando couldn't cross with him. And while Ando's instinct to distance himself is entirely human, it also left Hiro feeling more isolated. Ando was young, unprepared for the weight of Hiro's trauma, and scared of his powers. Faced with the moral and emotional challenges of a friend who had become a killer, Ando chooses to step back, perhaps feeling powerless to change Hiro's course. Hiro never gave up on Ando and tried to get him back to school and even stood up against his bullies. And he was expecting and hoping for that kind of unwavered support from Ando. However, Ando's withdrawal and rejection were profoundly painful for Hiro, whose sense of abandonment was already acute. Hiro saw in Ando as one of the last people in his life who could offer him understanding and acceptance. Losing Ando's friendship was like losing his last tie to his former self, and it's likely that Hiro felt a sense of betrayal, because he may have hoped that Ando would stand by him no matter what. Had Ando confronted Hiro and urged him to stop, or perhaps talked to him more, it's likely Hiro would have taken it seriously, just as his mother's words had a strong impact on him. Hiro's complex attachment to Ando also hints that may have been subconsciously waiting for Ando to challenge or save him, hoping Ando would try to reach him in his darkest moments.
関係ないけど、最近この辺で通り魔出るの知ってる？通り魔。もう8人くらい死んでる。犯人まだ捕まってないし、目撃情報もないって。
それが？
あれ、お前じゃない？
なんで俺が？意味わかんないんだけど。
ずっと学校休んでた間、何してたんだ？
ずっと寝てただけだよ。
お前、なんかあったろ？何があった？なんてな。まあね、多分ガンとか重い病気も治せると思うよ。これでお前の心の傷も治してやれりゃいいんだけどな。なんてな。
だよ。
These scenes highlight Hiro's vulnerability and his unspoken hope that someone, especially his childhood friend, would reach out to him and try to help him, even as he was descending into darkness. He was hoping Ando to ask him these questions, and the emotional scars he wants to heal here are his own. He was hoping that Ando will care so much about him and try to save him and not give up on him. While Ando was understandably fearful and morally conflicted, his withdrawal could have inadvertently deepened Hiro's despair and detachment. Had Ando spoken up, urged Hiro to stop, or even show him an alternate path, Hiro probably would have felt some of the accountability he felt with his mother and Shion later on. A hurtful appeal from Ando to Hiro's bitter nature might have disrupted Hiro's spiral into violence, just as his mother's words convinced him to stop killing. Hiro's preference for fictional characters over real people may also indicate a longing for idealized relationships. In manga, relationships between characters are often simpler, clearer, and more satisfying than real-world relationships, as Hiro's own life was filled with emotional turmoil and neglect. In manga, he could find relationships that were stable, where characters are loyal, supportive, and heroic in ways that real people in his life were not. This could explain why he found comfort in manga characters and cared for them more than the faceless strangers he killed without remorse. Crying over manga was his way of engaging with emotions that were too difficult or complex for him to express in reality. This behavior also shows Hiro's sensitivity and empathy, traits that were often hidden behind his detached and sometimes cold demeanor. It wasn't that he was incapable of feeling, rather he was overwhelmed by his emotions and didn't know how to process them in a healthy way. Manga became a channel through which he could experience and process these emotions, demonstrating that deep down, Hiro wasn't a monster, but a deeply hurt and lonely person searching for understanding and connection. Manga and his characters provided Hiro with an escape world where he could connect emotionally without the fear of being hurt or rejected. Fictional characters in manga don't betray or abandon him. They remain static, predictable, and reliable, unlike the real people in his life who have caused him pain. Manga became a refuge for Hiro, a way to escape the harsh realities of his life and enter a space where he felt some control. Hiro's power may have amplified his darker tendencies, but they also reflect a deeper truth, that unchecked power in the hands of someone emotionally damaged can lead to catastrophic consequences. Hiro was a troubled teen, already grappling with feelings of abandonment, loneliness, and repressed anger. When he suddenly gained his abilities to act on his darkest impulses without facing any repercussions, those impulses were magnified. Without anyone to guide him or help him understand his powers, Hiro used them as a means to express his pain. The unreal powers he gained allowed him to lash at the world in ways he couldn't before, turning his emotional suffering into physical violence. If just one person in the world believes in you, you can be redeemed. I read this quote once in my favorite manga series, Hunter x Hunter. It's a story of Razor, a hardened criminal, ended up drastically changing because someone believed in him and offered him a new path. Shion Watanabe is Hiro's classmate. She is a kind, quiet girl. She seemed to interact with select few girls at school and looked to have no friends. She felt drawn to Hiro after he stood up for his friend Ando against his bullies. Shion's circumstances mirrored Hiro's to some degree, creating a unique bond between them. Like Hiro, she also experienced childhood trauma as she lost both of her parents and had to take on a caretaker role for her frail grandmother, leaving her searching for a genuine human connection. When Hiro stood up for Ando against the bullies, Shion saw a side of him that resonated with her own desires for love and protection. She saw in Hiro someone who, despite his outward detachment, had the capacity to defend and stand up for those he cared about, a quality she longed for in her own life. This protective nature appealed to her because it suggested, unlike others in her life who are weak or left her, Hiro had the strength and the resolve not to abandon those he loved. For Shion, falling in love with Hiro was about finding someone who could provide her with the emotional security she had never truly experienced. She hoped that if Hiro loved her, he would extend that protective instinct to her, becoming the steadfast and unyielding presence in her life she desperately needed. This longing for connection, combined with the understanding of each other's struggles, made their relationships a powerful and significant bond in both their lives. Shion, idolizing Hiro's connection and having unwavering belief in his potential for change, is a turning point for his character. Despite knowing who Hiro is and what he has done, Shion offered him unconditional love, emotional support and acceptance, the things that he had been seeking all his life. After his mother's death, Hiro was at his most vulnerable. Shion's belief in him and her willingness to see past his actions helped Hiro recognize that he is capable for more than evil. Her love gave Hiro a reason to reflect on his choices, and for a time he even stopped killing and started healing people, showing that he was not beyond change. For only who have no interest in redemption are beyond it. Her belief in him became the catalyst for his transformation, proving that love and understanding can have a profound impact on even the most broken of individuals.
あの時、あの公園に、君は何でいたの?
When Hiro was going back from school, he witnessed a man take his own life. Hiro's exposure to such stark display of despair hit close to home. He saw a reflection of his own hopelessness in that man's final act. Following this, Hiro made his way to a secluded park, where he likely reflected in his own thoughts of suicide. Opposite of Ichiro, who went there to cry in despair for him being close to death, Hiro stood there, thinking that death could be his salvation. Hiro's ultimate decision to blow himself and save the planet revealed that he had indeed been running simulation in his head, contemplating his death long before his final act. His choice wasn't impulsive, rather it was a culmination of long-standing inner battle. The initial thought of suicide spurred by that man's death on the tracks planted a seed in Hiro's mind, a readiness to accept his mortality as a potential resolution for his pain. When the opportunity arose to sacrifice himself and save his loved ones, he took it willingly, demonstrating a resignation to death that has been with him for a long time. In the end, Hiro's journey came full circle. What began as a private thought of his own end transformed into a deliberate act of self-sacrifice, bringing a tragic sense of purpose to his life. Through the act, he was considered for other reasons entirely. Hiro is one of the most complex and tragic figures in the world of fiction. His journey from a troubled teen to a mass murderer and ultimately a self-sacrificing hero reflect the fragile nature of humanity when faced with emotional trauma at a young age. His final act of redemption speaks to our potential for goodness in even the darkest of souls, raising the question about how we should judge those who commit unspeakable acts under such circumstances. Here's Johnny is one of tragedy, a story of how a person can be shaped by their circumstances, but also of how they can choose to change, even in their final moments. If we made it this far, thank you, truly. It's mean more than you know. If this spoke to you, even just a little, consider subscribing.